Good morning and welcome to Rising. Welcome back from holiday. We've got a great show for you today. We've taken everything we own that's white and set it on fire, thrown it out of our closets, right? Isn't that the rule?
No more white clothing after Labour Day. I hope you were celebrating the cause of Labour yesterday, Robby. Marching in any union parades?
Oh, yes. Actually, there were protesters who marched past my apartment the other day in Navy Yard, as most people know where I live by now. And you know, I'm just such an enthusiast for the First Amendment that God bless them.
You let them go on their way. I'm glad they were allowed to go untrammeled.
A good holiday you had?
I did, thank you. Yes, all well. I enjoy a good long weekend, so it was peaceful and pleasant.
Yes.
I'm glad to be back with you.
Mine as well.
Coming up on Rising, 9 former CDC directors are bashing HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying he is endangering Americans' health.
Plus, President Trump says he'll be awarding former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who was injured over the weekend, with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
And a federal judge blocked a Trump administration move to deport minors back to Guatemala. But first, Robby, let's get to it. What is on your radar?
President Donald Trump is attempting to fire Lisa Cook, one of the board members of the Federal Reserve, and there are some reasons for him to do so that you may not have heard about yet. Now, mainstream commentators have described Trump's actions as an unprecedented attack on the Fed's autonomy because no president has ever dismissed a member of the board, which is supposed to operate independent of political pressure. Conservatives, on the other hand, say the allegations against Cook make her a special case. Libertarians like myself care less about tinkering with the Fed's composition, and instead we just want to abolish it outright, to be honest. Regardless, however, the Trump administration has accused Cook of committing mortgage fraud. William Pulte, director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, penned a criminal referral alleging that she made false statements about her principal residence in order to obtain more favorable mortgage terms. She, of course, has yet to be charged and deserves the presumption of innocence just like anyone else. Whether this justification is sufficient for the president to remove Cook for cause, that's a matter for debate, as the constitutional issues are not fully settled. Trump is in a long-running dispute with Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and wants to bend the Fed to his will in order to get monetary policies that would benefit the administration in the short term. Firing Cook is clearly political in that sense, but on the other hand, it's reasonable to expect Federal Reserve Board members to have their own finances in relatively perfect order, I would think. But what has interested me most about Lisa Cook is actually a totally separate controversy from 5 years ago. I'd completely forgotten about it, but the kerfuffle is worth revisiting in light of recent developments. So when Cook was first nominated to the Fed a few years back, there was some scrutiny of a paper she had written about the impacts of racism on black entrepreneurs between the years 1870 and 1940. According to the abstract, Cook found that political violence against black Americans during that time period caused them to receive 1,100 fewer patents. Now, that conclusion seems straightforward enough, reasonable to assume that the rise of segregation was a serious impediment to black achievement. But a subsequent study suggested Cook actually got her figures wrong. She relied on a statistic that was not relevant, and it prompted the conservative activist Christopher Rufo, who many of you know, to audit her writings and conclude that, as with former Harvard University President Claudine Gay, Cook was somewhat incautious when it came to quoting, paraphrasing, and copying other scholars' work. Cook taught at both Harvard and Michigan State University. Now, in other words, there may be a pattern of carelessness here, in my opinion. But in researching the academic misconduct scrutiny, I came across something else. Cook was also involved in the effort to oust Harald Uhlig, then editor of the Journal of Political Economy, for crimes against wokeness. The Uhlig affair was a classic example of cancel culture run amok. The summer of 2020, Uhlig wrote a few tweets in which he politely but firmly criticized the Black Lives Matter movement for embracing the slogan, defund the police. His most provocative sentence was, George Floyd and his family really didn't deserve to be taken advantage of by flat earthers and creationists, with reference to supporters of defunding the police. Now, I think that barely qualifies as a spicy statement. It's not exactly white supremacy advocacy. Nevertheless, in response to those tweets, as well as unproven and frankly ridiculous accusations that he had said something negative about Martin Luther King Jr. while teaching a class at the University of Chicago in 2014, a progressive mob called for Uhlig, this professor, to lose his job. Among the economists demanding Uhlig's head were Paul Krugman, Justin Wolfers, Janet Yellen, and Lisa Cook. Wolfers was particularly emphatic. He wrote on Twitter, now X, that by continuing to employ Uhlig, the University of Chicago was effectively telling minority scholars that the quality of their work would be judged by someone who consistently tried to minimize the legitimacy of Black Lives Matter in favor of racists. Cook also penned a thread on Twitter in which she called for the prompt removal of Uhlig. I found these tweets again. They're incredible. The thread really is something. It betrays her commitment to basically every speech-related woke shibboleth. Cook writes that free speech has its limits and should not be used to spread hatred and violate the dignity of other people. She suggests that any and all criticism of MLK Jr. causes psychic harm to marginalized communities. This is real pain you are inflicting. That's her quote. Likened it to actual racist violence against civil rights protesters in the 1950s and 60s. Again, we're talking about a series of tweets in which this man, Uhlig, said defending the police was a bad idea, as well as an insinuation that he once said something mildly critical about MLK Jr., perhaps in jest or perhaps not at all. The cancel culture campaign was successful, albeit temporarily. Uhlig was placed on leave pending an investigation. Eventually, he was reinstated after cooler heads prevailed. I guess that having a sane view on these kinds of things is not a prerequisite for working at the Fed, but I don't think it speaks well of Cook that she took the view that Uhlig should lose his job over this. Uhlig, by the way, got her back in 2022 when President Joe Biden nominated Cook to the Fed board. Uhlig wrote an opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal that was titled, "The Fed Doesn't Need a Censor." Nevertheless, the Democratic-controlled Senate confirmed her nomination, with Kamala Harris casting the tie-breaking vote. She's currently suing Trump to keep her job, and we will see if she prevails. I started researching this just to remember what a different time 2020 was, because I truly don't believe today anyone would have batted an eyelash at those tweets that had Paul Krugman and Janet Yellen and everyone else and Lisa Cook calling for him to lose his job. It's now like just accepted with, Zohran Mamdani is running away from the defund the police scandal. Now, she was confirmed, I get it. So, Republicans had their chance to tank her nomination. I don't think she should be taken out of this position in a way that violates the law, whether the allegation of the mortgage issue is enough to qualify as firing for cause is, as far as I can tell, an undecided constitutional issue, so we'll see. But I think it speaks to her judgment a little bit that she was involved in this matter.
So, a couple of things. One is in relation to her firing or attempted firing. That, to me, obviously has to be put in the context of President Trump's attempt to bring the Fed more firmly under his control. It comes against the backdrop of him continually attacking Jerome Powell for not cutting interest rates as fast as he would like. I would not defend Cook if it is proven that she did the mortgage-related stuff. I am less alarmed than you are about the subject of your radar. Briefly, Mr. Uhlig had two jobs, of course. One was as a professor. The other one was as this editor of the Journal of Political Economy, which you mentioned, which was purportedly prestigious. The petition against him was aimed at the second of those jobs, arguing that if he were biased against black people, that would not be obviously an appropriate attitude for someone who's the editor of such a job to have. In relation to the George Floyd thing, you read the point which I found rather patronizing on his part, the suggestion that people who support defund the police are equivalent to flat earthers. The thing about Martin Luther King was the suggestion, which someone else did corroborate, that in an MLK lecture on MLK Day, he said, "I don't know why it's a holiday. They always complain about something. I probably offended some of them," and then turned to a black student and said, "Like you." The black student being a man called Bokhar Ba, who's now assistant professor at Duke University. Those comments to me do call into question whether that is someone you want editing a prestigious journal, inclusion or exclusion of which affects people's career. Of course, as a presumably tenured professor, he has a lot of free speech rights there that shouldn't be encumbered by that. Meanwhile, an op-ed in the New York Times published Monday is raising the alarm on Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We'll be right back with that.